Well, you join me on a cold Saturday morning, folks, and you can probably see what today's film's all about. I've fitted a new modification, so I've managed to install my BMW SatNav 6 onto the Monster R. Okay, so I'd like to say it was a reasonably straightforward procedure, and in some aspects it was. The RAM mount's fairly straightforward. The electrical side of things is a little bit more of a challenge, but I'm going to share with you my approach, and hopefully you can get something out of that. And I think obviously this will show you how to fit the BMW SatNav onto the Monster R, but I think just generally speaking it will also show you how to fit a sort of a standard SatNav onto a Ducati, or to be honest probably any other bike actually, so and the kind of things you need to think about and the kind of pitfalls that might exist. So as I normally say at this stage, if I can do it, you can do it. So make yourself a brew, sit down, make yourself comfortable, and pull up a chair and have a laugh at my installation. Hi folks, so I've got the Monster R and I'm just busy making a few modifications to it to suit my own particular needs for it. I've spent 40 odd years in the defence and aerospace business, and of course the modification there is defined as a change in fit, form or function. So I will make some cosmetic sort of fashionable changes to the R at some stage when Mrs. Back to the Bike decides to release a few more funds, but I think I'll be pushing my luck at the moment, so I'm not going to do that right now. So we're just busy at the moment just making it functionally efficient for my own particular uses. So one of those particular needs is I actually want to take my BMW Nav VI SatNav, which I got for the RT, and I'd like to be able to fit it onto the Monster R. So of course not an easy proposition to do that, so I've like everybody else done a little bit of research on YouTube, sort of cast around the internet, and basically pulled together what I think is a bit of a methodology. So if we just quickly nip out to the bike, I'll show you first of all where we're going to take our 12-volt power feed from. So I've been trying to work out a way of actually fitting the SatNav to the Ducati Monster. So in order to do that you obviously need a 12-volt feed. So looking at one of the Ducati forums, a very helpful gentleman has posted some photographs, and the bit you've got to focus in on is this rubber shroud, which is just behind the headstock here, and that's just held in by a little rubber tab, and if you pull that back you can now see a little white connector in there. Now, just out of interest, when I first pulled that tab back I couldn't see that white connector. I thought maybe it wasn't fitted on my bike, but actually it was just buried behind the frame, so I just had to fish around and it actually dropped down a little bit just below this upright here. So anyway, a bit of fishing around, I've actually found it. It's had this little thing stuck in the end of it, which is just a blanking plug, I think, just to sort of stop the contacts from getting grunged up. So you have to pull that out. Now, in order to do that, if you notice, there's like a little sort of triangular shaped notch there. So you've basically got to pull up a little white tab on that white connector just to ease that out. So let's look at the parts that we need to get hold of. Let's also look at the tools that I'm going to be using today. So most of the tools, to be honest, you're going to find typically in your sort of standard garage or workshop. The principal thing you need is one of these, which is it's known as a Sumitomo two-way female HM connector, Japanese electrical plug, signposted here on eBay for a Honda KTM. So I'll put a link in that for you. That cost me £3.99, which comes with the little spade connectors and also these little rubber waterproof plugs. Now, as well as that, I'm also going to have to connect my BMW SatNav mount, SatNav cradle, which I managed to buy off eBay. So it's actually it was second hand, but it's never been used, funnily enough. So I managed to get that for half price off eBay, which was quite nice. So it's the BMW Motorrad cradle for the SatNav 5 and 6, I think it is. But obviously comes with the sort of standard BMW connectors. I also went onto eBay for a pack of these two-way, two-pin sealed waterproof electrical wire connectors for cars, because I'm going to have to basically cut the wire that connects the BMW SatNav cradle and I'm going to have to make just a couple of adjustments to that, as I'll show you through the through the film. But apart from that, that's it actually. So it's just those three items. In terms of the actual tools for the job, I've got myself a pair of side cutters. I've got a standard digital multimeter and some wire strippers as well. Yeah, so the requirement was to come up with a solution that's going to be very safe, because it's going to have a very expensive sat-nav sitting on it. It's got to be weatherproof, it's got to be robust, and also it's got to be easy to put on and take off. So I ordered the various ram mount fittings to go on the back of the sat-nav cradle, but electrically as well. I didn't want to be sort of fishing around inside the Ducati's electrics every time I install it on the bike or take it off. So that's why I've gone for these two-way automotive connectors, because I think that will give me just a very easy solution just to sort of snap the bike on and actually snap it off. Okay, so the first step, like any good surgeon, is to make a bold incision. So I've got to separate this wire in half, because this part of the wire is going to go down into the bowels of the Ducati Monsters electrics, and I shall be changing the connector over for a standard sort of fit, which is that little Japanese plug we just talked about, and obviously this end then is going to sit. This end is going to sit on the handlebars, and basically where that red wire is there now, we're actually going to be using these auto electric plugs just to make a nice sort of join there that can be easily disattached. So as I say, this makes me sort of feel slightly nervous, but let's just go for it, shall we? Okay, done. So we'll just put that on one side, as they say on Blue Peter. And then the next thing is just to get these wires stripped off. So I know that the red wire on this particular installation is the positive, and the black is the ground. Okay, so the wire's been severed. You can see I've isolated the positive and the ground. So the positive is the red and the ground is the black. And I've just put a little bit of heat shrink tubing around the main part of the wire here, just to tidy that up. I'll pull that over a little bit later on and heat shrink that down. And also the three redundant wires, which I think probably have something to do with the connection to the GS's onboard computer, which can put up various information on the sat-nav. They're redundant. I've also put some heat shrink tubing around that. So I just need to feed these little rubber grommets on, which will, I presume, stop the water getting into the actual plug itself before I crimp the terminals on. So let's just put those on. So there's just a little bit of preparation, so obviously you don't want to forget to put those on before you put the terminals on themselves. Okay, so the next job now then is to use the crimpers to crimp the little terminals onto the wire. So I'm not an expert in this. In fact, I've never done it before. So we'll just crimp those on, and hopefully that will go to plan. So let's give that a go, shall we? I'm sure all the electricians watching this will be cringing as I'm doing this. This is one of these things that always looks very simple on YouTube, isn't it, when you've got some bloke with 40 years experience behind him. Okay, that appears to be on. Only took me 4 attempts. Right, so I think we're in business. And as
a little tip I picked up on YouTube again was that these little tags that actually hold the insulator in, the insulated wire in place can often be too long, so you just sometimes need just to trim those down just a little bit.
Well, here we are folks. As you can see, I've mounted the SatNav 6 onto the ram mount. Okay, the ram mount's attached to the handlebars. I've got one connection here, which in theory is waterproof, although I think I probably need to do something about this little bit of exposure here, although in theory those little yellow bungs should keep the water out, but I think I might put some liquid electrical tape onto that. Down here you can see I've snipped off the extraneous connectors that I don't need, and I put a bit of heat shrink on that as well. And here I've done an absolutely magnificent job with some red insulating tape of just trying to waterproof the back of that standard plug that plugs into the Ducati's electrical 12 volt harness. So it's the moment of truth. It's the moment of truth, so let's put the ignition on and hopefully the SatNav bursts into life. And there it is, success. Must be honest, I feel moderately pleased with that. After I left you at the, or rather after I switched off the camera at the kitchen table last night, I'd just a little bit of a crisis because I'd attached the plug to the wrong bit of the harness. I had to take all that off. I had to do several bits of playing around with these electrical connectors, because there's obviously an art. You know, people on YouTube make it look very easy to connect these, but to be honest, if you've never done one before, it's very fiddly. And it just takes a few just to get it right. So if you are going to go down this route, I'd suggest you buy yourself a few more and just experiment first of all. But yeah, there we are. So now we have a working German SatNav on an Italian bike. Okay, which I must be honest, I'm absolutely delighted with. So so there we go. So that's another modification to the functionality of the monster. And as you can see here, just from the sort of rider's position, the SatNav doesn't occlude anything. It's not going to stop me looking through the mirror. I always use sort of touch anyway to access the bike's controls down here, so that won't make any difference. But now, you know, I can sort of obviously I can sort of fine-tune that. And get the angles here just right, and I think just the last thing now is just to route this cable through the probably along the route of these cables here, but there's you can see it's not much of a cable run from there to there. And then I think the last thing then is just to put some kind of a contraption in just to hold the socket from this, I think probably against the inside of the fairing, so it gets a modicum of shelter from the elements, but also it'll just look neater, won't it? So there we go. So in theory then, if I turn off now, I turn off. Yeah, there we are. Okay, so the bike and the SatNav are talking to each other. So I think this just goes to show, you know, if you do move over from a BMW to a different bike and you're looking for a solution, then you get yourself the cradle. I've got the sort of more expensive cradle here, which has the buttons down the side. You can buy a slimmer cradle. It's actually one from that comes direct from Garmin. That will do the job equally well. I think that costs about £90, I seem to remember. I'll put a link for you below. I saw one of those at the at Motorcycle Live. But yeah, it's doable. So and as I always say with these jobs, if I can do it, you can do it. But this video gives you a clue as to how you attach a SatNav and wire it into a Ducati. In fact, I'm so pleased with that modification. I think I've got to do a little dance. Okay, so here's the final installation. You can see now that the cable comes up here. Here's the redundant shrink wrapped cable that I didn't need, which has some extra functionality, I think, which connects onto things like the GS, doesn't it, on the GS's whiz wheel. So then I've routed the plug up behind the headlight here. It comes out through here. I've tucked it under that Ducati rubber cable tidy there, so it then comes along here. I had to be careful. I had a little test actually, and it was actually fouling on the steering damper. Okay, so I've therefore routed the cable underneath the handlebar, and you can see I've just used one little tie there just to sort of tie it onto the handlebars. One of the things I wanted to be able to do was the installation should allow me to take the SatNav off quite quickly, and that's now possible because it's very easy now just to pull that clip off and away we go. So there we are. Okay, and I can take the SatNav off, and I can also very easily now obviously remove the ram mount and actually remove the cradle for us as well. So I'm actually pleased with that. Ticks all the boxes. It took me a few hours, but I think most of that was learning curve, to be honest. I'm sure those of you who are better engineers than me, which is probably just about everyone who watches this channel, and those of you who have any sort of nous with electrical gubbins will actually be able to do this job a lot faster, but reasonably straightforward. So a bit of mechanical, a bit of electrical, but there we are. We've now got a functioning sat-nav on the monster, which means I also have music, which means I also have communications as well, which is and traffic information, which is always handy to have. So I've at least restored in part some of the functionality I lost when I sold the RT. Okay, so there we go. That's Back to the Bike signing off. Thanks for tuning in. Let me have your comments. I'll be interested in any sort of comments or feedback. But I think the principles, obviously, this is a specific installation for a BMW Nav VI SatNav onto the Ducati Monster R. But I think the principles will probably stand for any generic sat-nav installation onto let's say a strange non-native motorbike. Okay, there you go, folks. Tuning out. Let me know what you think. I'll speak to you soon.